Hello students, welcome to Notebook. Do you know what shadow play or shadow puppetry is? Shadow puppetry is an ancient way of storytelling and entertainment. Shadow show groups still perform or show their shadow plays in many countries, especially in Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Nepal, and China. Shadow puppet shows have always been very popular in India ever since the old ages. These shows are known locally as the Kilu Bomme and Tholu Bommalata of Andhra Pradesh, the Charma Bahuli Natya in Maharashtra, the Togulu Gombeata in Karnataka, and the Ravanachaya in Orissa, the Tholpava Kottu in Kerala. Dance forms like the Chou in Orissa means shadow. In the poem we are going to study today, a child is very interested in his shadow. He observes the shadow all day as it changes shape and size. We will talk more about the child and his shadow, but first let us learn a little more about our poet. The poem My Shadow is written by R.L. Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson or R.L. Stevenson was born in 1850 in Scotland. He was a celebrated novelist, poet, essayist, musician, and travel writer. His most popular books are Kidnapped, Treasure Island, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and A Children's Garden of Verses. My Shadow is from the book A Child's Garden of Verses. You only have an excerpt or portion of the poem in your syllabus. The original poem has 4 stanzas. Each stanza consists of 4 lines. Every 2 successive lines rhymes. We will study 3 stanzas of the poem. This is how the first stanza goes. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me, from the heels up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. The poet uses the first person, I, to narrate the poem. The way the poem is recited tells us that the first person narrator is a child. The shadow is personified or given human qualities. The child narrator refers to the shadow as he instead of it. The narrator wonders at the tiny shadow which is very like him in form. The shadow follows him around. He jumps onto bed before the child narrator jumps on the bed himself. Now let us look at the second stanza. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow. Not at all like proper children, which is always very slow. For he sometimes shoots up taller like an India rubber ball. And he sometimes gets so little that there is none of him at all. The shadow's growth does not follow the rule by which children grow. He sometimes springs up like an India rubber ball and becomes enormous or very large in size. The longest shadows form during sunrise and sunset. At other times, the shadow shrinks or reduces to such a small size that he is almost invisible. The shortest shadow is formed at noon. Now, what is India rubber? Why has the shadow's growth been compared to an India rubber ball? Natural rubber made from the sap of certain trees is called the India rubber. India rubber has great elasticity and is very bouncy. An India rubber ball springs up to a great height when it bounces or touches the ground. So the poet tells us that shadow shoots up taller or higher than an India rubber ball. Now let us look at the final stanza of the poem. One morning, very early, before the sun was up, I rose and found the shining dew on every buttercup. But my lazy little shadow, like an errant sleepy head, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed. This stanza tells us about the events of one particular day in the life of a child narrator. The child wakes up early one morning before the sun has risen. How do we know that it is really early in the morning? We can say that it is really early in the morning because the dew is still shining on the buttercups. Buttercups have shiny yellow petals and they grow in the wild in many places of the world. We know that shadows cannot be seen in the dark or when there is very little light. When the child rises early and leaves home, he finds that the shadow is still fast asleep like an errant or total sleepyhead. The shadow is lazy and he has not bothered to accompany the child so early in the morning when the sun has not risen. With that, we come to the end of our video lesson on my shadow. Observe the different kinds of shadows around you at different times of the day. Keep notes on how these shadows look. See you soon in our other videos. Till then, happy learning.